Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Professionalism in the EFL Classroom. My name is Mark and I'm going to be presenting to you. So before we start, please say hello in the chat and tell me where you are. So let's see where people are around the world this afternoon. It'd be great to hear from you. So I'm in a small town called Bridgend, which is in South Wales, and it's quite hot and sunny here today. Okay, we've got Shelton from South Africa. Hello to you. And Ella from Norway. Hi to you. And Yulia from Ukraine. Good afternoon, Yulia. And we've got Alexandra from Swansea, just down the road. Cordelia, hello from South Africa there. Mena from Egypt. Brendan from Galway. So hello to everyone and welcome. So, like I say, today we're going to be talking about professionalism in the EFL classroom. So, we're going to be talking about a few different areas this afternoon. So, we're going to be talking about administration, lesson preparation, interaction with students, personal learning networks, and continuing professional development. So you've got your first job and you're walking into school on your first day, and it's going to be really exciting and there's lots of great things to look forward to. But there's also going to be quite a few nerves because it's all going to be new. It's going to be a new environment, a new way of working. It could be the first time ever that you've been in a language classroom as a teacher. So there's going to be a lot of nerves as well. And so to help with those nerves and to help with the first few days just to go a little bit more smoothly, it can be a good idea to put a few admin things in place to help you be organized and ready to start. So a really good thing to do is to have a teaching diary. And in this diary, you should definitely have your timetable. So you know what you're going to be teaching every day. You can also create in your diary a to-do list of technology. So any technology that you're going to need during the week, any artwork that you need to prepare for, or are there any special materials which you wouldn't normally need in a lesson? It's important to do a to-do list ready for the week so that you don't forget these things. Another important thing to include in your teaching diary is a reflection section. So this is an opportunity for you to think about the lessons that you've taught so far, the things that have gone well in those lessons. So any particular activities that stand out as working really well, anything that hasn't gone quite to plan, and perhaps you need to tweak a little bit for next time. Okay, and then also a summary of completed work. Now, of course, you're going to have your lesson plans. They're going to be there ready to go. But you'll quickly realize that not all of your lessons are going to go to plan. Sometimes you're going to get through material a little bit more quickly. Other times you're not going to get through all the material that you've planned. So it's important to keep a note of where you've got up to so that you know where to plan from for your next lesson, because I can guarantee that with that first week, you're unlikely to remember on Friday what you did on Monday. So it's really useful just to keep a note somewhere for yourself of what you've done so you don't lose track. Another useful thing to do is to start to collate a teaching file. And in this file, you'll have the syllabus or scheme of work for each class or level that you're teaching. In here, you'll be able to keep the register for each class. Keep all your lesson plans as well. Some teachers in the past, I know, have kept lesson plans, so the next time that they're teaching that same lesson or same level, they can just put out the lesson plan and recycle it. That helps to a point, but it's important to remember that all classes are different. Everyone is different. And so they might not be in exactly the same place. They might have different needs and expectations. So one lesson plan isn't going to work for every single class that you teach. If you're doing adult intermediates, for example. But keep them there because it will give you a reminder of what you did and the activities that you put together, any materials and things that you used. Keep in there as well any sample worksheets and materials to make it perhaps a bit easier to find when you're teaching that class again in the future. So all of these things will help preparation for future classes, making your life easier for the future. It's important as well to keep this file neat and up to date. You're really creating this file for you. Okay, it's going to make your life easier in the future. It's going to make it much easier to recycle any materials or things that you've used in the class. So the neater and the more up to date you can keep it, you're sort of saving yourself a job for the future. Okay. The next point here, having a bibliography of online resources. This is actually really important because you'll do a search for some resource. I don't know, you're teaching first conditional to intermediate students. You go online, you do a search, you come across a great resource which you use in class. It goes really well. Your students really enjoy it. But then you can't find it again. Next time you're teaching that class, you can't find it. And that's so frustrating. You've got a website, it's got really good material, but now you can't find that website again. It can be really frustrating and time consuming. So keep a note of these online resources. Okay, keep that in your file so you've got it there. And maybe as well, keep a note of any copyright issues that there are. So anywhere that you've got sources from, because it could be like at the bottom of materials and things like that, you need to reference where they've come from. So it can be a good idea to keep that to hand. Of course, you need to be prepared for every lesson. And you will have a lesson plan for every lesson that you teach. But it's a good idea as well to have a backup plan for anything that can go wrong. So that doesn't really mean that you're creating 2 lesson plans for each lesson, but it's different parts. It's where there's possibilities that things could go wrong. So, for example, if you're teaching a young learning class or a class of teenagers, you might have a warmer which has them up and walking around and speaking to different people in a really nice interactive class, warmer to start the class. But then when they come in, they're already really full of energy. Something's happened outside or something's happened during the day, which means when they come to your class, they're really already energized and full of excitement. Well, if you do a warm-up where they're interacting with each other and moving around, you're actually going to increase that energy and increase that excitement. So what you actually want to do in that case is to have a warmer where they're they're doing a worksheet, or they're what we call a heads down activity. So it's where they're writing or reading something rather than perhaps interacting with each other. So in that case, you need to have those two different warmers ready just in case. Because also the other way around can happen. So you've got a class of teenagers, for example, who always come in and they're really lethargic and it's hard to get them going. So you always have your nice activity to get them energized. And then one day they come in and they're already full of energy. So you've got to switch it around the other way. Okay. So be adaptable. Anytime that you're using technology, be prepared for it to go wrong. So what will you do if the recording doesn't work? What will you do if that YouTube clip doesn't load? Is there any way around that so you can deal with the situation? These are all things to think about. Okay. So we typically say that for a 1 hour lesson, when you start teaching, it's going to take about 2 hours to prepare. But of course, you can see if you start to put in these steps that we've already looked at this afternoon, that time is going to very quickly start to reduce. But that 2 hours, you're looking for material. It's not just writing your lesson plan, it's looking for that material, it's doing the searches on the internet to find good material that you can use. So with experience, you're going to find that you're able to recycle and adapt teaching materials as well. The internet is a great resource, and with time you'll be able to easily find material and activities and things that you can do online. But sometimes, the majority of the time really, it's worth spending a few minutes and looking at how you can adapt that material to make sure that it works for your class. And try and spend some time as well just creating some extra resources for your students. Just for those times where perhaps you've got an extra couple of minutes at the end of the lesson, or you need to change what you're going to do in your lesson for some reason. Maybe an activity isn't working very well, so you decide to stop that activity and you need something else to come in. So as you would have seen through the course, time management is key and it's really important. So having those extra resources, having those materials, being adaptable means that you're going to be able to keep to time more efficiently. So you're in the classroom with your students. The first thing we say here is be a teacher. Don't be mum, dad, or a friend, and that's absolutely true. You're there to teach them, and you can be friendly, but it's important to remember that you're not there to be their friend. And remembering that is going to make it much easier for you to deal with any classroom management issues that come up as time goes on. So remember, you're not there to be their friend, but it's important to be friendly. Spend some time talking to your students. Try and spend a few minutes chatting with them about school or university or work. If you know they've got exams coming up, how are exams going? How are exams going? What did they do at the weekend? Show interest in your students. It will really help to create a great rapport. I saw a tweet earlier on in the week from a teacher who said that he was asked if he knew that the next lesson that he was going to teach would be the last lesson he ever taught, what would he teach? And he said his answer was nothing. He would sit down and he would talk to his students. And I thought about that and I thought, yeah, do you know what? That's absolutely right. And I think I would do the same thing. Because having that time, taking that time to chat to your students, a few minutes at the end, the beginning of the lesson or the end of the lesson, spending time just to get to know them creates such a great rapport that that it just helps everything else to go along much smoother in the lesson. Like any other job that you've done, or anything other things that you've done in life, there are going to be issues. There are going to be things that happen to you outside of the classroom. But it's really important that you don't bring those issues into your classroom. I always say you kind of got to imagine that there's like an invisible sort of cloak or something in the doorway, and whatever's happened outside gets left outside, so it doesn't get dragged in with you. If you've had an argument at home, or if your boss has given you, an unexpected and possibly unreasonable demand, that's not your student's fault. So you really can't take it out, and you've got to remember that. Okay, so leave all those things at the classroom door. Look the part. So you're a teacher, so dress as a teacher. That doesn't mean to say that you got to wear a suit and tie necessarily, unless the place where you're working is saying that you do. But be neat. Where so you look. So if somebody walks in the room, they can sort of tell who the teacher is. Be punctual as well. You should always arrive to class before your students. That's the general rule. You should always be in class before your students. You'll always have that one student who, it doesn't matter how early you turn up to class, they're already there. There's not much you can do about that person, but as a general rule, be there before your students is what you need to do. Keep a learner-centered classroom, and keep the learner-centered classroom. Make sure the students are the focus of the class. Your students will respect you. And remember that there's a presentation on TED by a speaker called Rita Pearson. The talk is called Every Child Deserves a Champion. And in this, Rita Pearson says that all great teachers are also great actors and actresses. And that's absolutely true. Think back to what we said before about, not bringing issues from outside the classroom into the classroom. That's part of being that actor or, actress. You're teaching when you don't always have 100% energy, but you've got to give it 100% energy. So what she says is absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that it should all be about the teacher and the performance of the teacher. You're there for the students. So that's what we've got to remember all the time. Be patient. That's often easier said than done. Being patient, but it is really important. Sometimes learning to take a breath before you say something. Okay. There will be students who will test your patience in lots of different ways. And it's always important, if you're teaching children or teenagers, remember that you are the adult and you're demonstrating how people should behave in the classroom, how people should treat each other. And that's the same if you're teaching adults. You're still the lead in the class, and you're demonstrating the behavior that you're expecting from other people. So if you want your students to be patient with each other and to listen to each other and not talk over each other, things like this, and you've got to do the same thing. Be Confident as well. Again, that's something which is easy to say, but takes a lot of practice. You have to hide sometimes. When you go into the classroom, perhaps for the first time or with a new class, you might feel a bit nervous, but it's hiding those nerves. Sometimes with classroom management, your students might try and get a reaction from you. So it's important not to react to things, to being confident, showing that you're in charge, you're in control. Okay. And the last one, be approachable. And this, perhaps out of all of these things, hopefully should be the easiest thing to do. So anytime your students have got a question, anytime they've got a concern about something in the classroom or homework, then they should know that you're available and they can come to you with any questions that they've got. So like we said, show genuine interest in your students, so taking time. And see, we talked about, at the start of the lesson, spending a few minutes, asking about what they did at the weekend or asking about exams. But that shouldn't be while you are doing something else. Take that moment, sit down with them and, ask those questions and listen to their answers, respond to their answers, show that you're interested in what they've got to say. Giving lots of positive feedback is really important, and what your students need. They need to hear what they're doing well as much as things that they need to correct. But make sure that your positive feedback, again, is genuine. I remember many years ago, I was working in a school and I observed a class, and every time a student spoke, the teacher would say, "Oh, well done, very good, oh, that's excellent." But they were saying it as they were going on to the next thing. So it was empty praise. And it doesn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything to the students, didn't mean anything to the teacher. So there was no point to it. So positive feedback, but genuine feedback as well. And that leads, of course, on to communication skills. You need to have good communication skills. Communication skills isn't just about speaking clearly, making sure that you're understood, but it's listening as well. Being able to listen to what your students are saying, listening to any concerns, anything that perhaps isn't going quite right, and being able to react and deal with that. Then being able to empathise with your students. So try to understand their feelings and difficulties. Learning a language isn't necessarily easy for everyone. People are going to be there for different reasons. They're going to have different feelings about why they are there. It's really important to empathise and to understand that, and to look at how you can get the best from your students with those feelings. So empathise with them. So it can be as simple as a few words, a little bit of understanding, and that can really help to reduce stress in the classroom. When I think back to learning languages when I was at school, so I learned French at school, and what I remember from learning French isn't French. I remember the teacher standing at the blackboard, which is what it was then, writing grammar rules on the board, usually in English, and us writing them down. And I always remember that my French classes were very teacher focused. But what you really want to do when you're teaching is, as much as possible, minimize teacher talking time and listen carefully to your students. So giving your students every opportunity to speak, and whether it's using the language or any kind of communication. Okay, so minimize teacher talking time and listening. You're going to have students in your class who are really confident, really willing to give it a go, and then you're going to have others who are less confident and perhaps find it more difficult to try things out. And you need to be able to encourage both of those people. If you have a student who's always the first to put up their hand, always giving the answer, they are good students. They're involved in your class and they are participating. They're doing what you want them to do. But if that means that other people perhaps have less opportunity, then you need to reduce the amount that student speaks. You've got to do it in a positive way. So it's, oh, great, you're doing really well. You're working really hard in class. Let's see what this person has to say. Okay. And then if you've got the student who is less involved, they find it more difficult to speak out in class and to give answers and things like that, then your encouragement has to be, really positive for them. So, well done, that's a really good answer. Or even when they give the wrong answer, so I might ask a question and I'll say, right, what do you think the answer is? And somebody will say, oh, this is the answer. That's a really good try. Well done. That's excellent. Does anyone else have any other ideas? Somebody else will give an answer. Oh, that's great. Yeah, so that what you said there, that's right. Can anyone build on that? So even when they give the wrong answer, still you want to encourage them because you want them to keep on trying. And that's how people learn, by trying and giving it a go. Don't have favorites is the next big thing. This is a really big thing. Okay. Your students, this is more to do with children and teenagers, but also with adults. Your students know if you have favorites, and they don't like it. It's not nice. It doesn't create a nice atmosphere in class. It can create issues with classroom management. And it makes everyone, it can make everyone feel uncomfortable. So don't have favorites. Treat everyone equally, everyone the same. Okay. Make sure you've got your classroom contract. So you should be doing that really in your first lesson. So I always have an idea of my classroom contract. So I've got the contract which I've had for many years now. That's the basis of my classroom contract. What I do is to get my students working in groups to come up with what they think the rules of the classroom should be, because they've been in class for a while, very often, and so they know what the rules are of the class, what the classroom expectations should be. So they know what to do. So I put them in groups, get them to come up with rules, and then I say, right, okay, tell me what you've come up with, and I write them up on the board, what they say. Some things I will write up exactly what they say because it's the same as what I think. Other things I'll say, yeah, that's really good. I'm just going to write it slightly differently to make it perhaps more inclusive, because they might say things like listen to the teacher. When in fact, what I want is for them to listen to the teacher, obviously, but listen to everyone in the class. And then other things like, no homework, or we get to play games every Friday. Say, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. Well done. What else have you got? So we get the positive feedback, but we move on from it. Finally, sense of humour. Now, that doesn't mean that you are cracking jokes all the time. In fact, it probably means that you're not cracking jokes all the time, because it goes back to the teacher not being the centre of attention, but having a sense of humour. And this particularly comes into play when things go wrong. When you're in the classroom, you will make mistakes. You will accidentally say the wrong word, and it will be an inappropriate word sometimes, and that's happened to me on several occasions. You'll be trying to elicit, or you'll be trying to explain something. You draw a quick diagram on the board and then realize you take a step back because everyone's laughing, and you're like, yeah, that's not what I wanted. All right. So it will happen. And what you've got to do when those things happen is be ready to say, yeah, okay, I did make a mistake. Yes, I did trip over the chair. I did spill my water. I did just say that. Yeah, okay. Not be the teacher who sort of starts shouting and screaming because they're embarrassed that they've made a mistake. So have a sense of humour. Be ready to sort of have a laugh when things happen in class. And yeah, it will help with classroom management, help things move along smoothly. So the next one, be honest. Yes, be honest. If you can't explain an answer, there are different ways to go around it. First of all, create a positive learning experience. So a student asks me a question, I say, oh, that's an interesting question. What do the rest of you think? Does anyone know the answer to that question? Okay, so there's a couple of reasons why I do that. First of all, I can see, does anyone else in the class know the answer? The second reason I do that is because it then gives me a moment to think, what is the answer? And just to double check that I know. Okay, so create that experience. If you don't know, admit that you don't know, rather than the old thing of making up an answer, or the teacher saying, oh, I was just seeing if you were awake, or anything like that. Don't bother with that. If you don't know, say, I don't know. I'll find out for you and I'll tell you next lesson. Okay. So yeah, be honest. Learn composure, finally. So don't get flustered when students are asking you questions. Just take it in your stride. If you know the answer, tell them the answer. If you don't know the answer, admit you don't know the answer. You're an English teacher. English itself is a massive subject. You can't possibly expect to know the answer to every single question about anything to do with English. And then there's all the other things that will come up, the topics that are covered in lessons. We've really focused quite a lot at the moment on the face-to-face classes, but you could as well be teaching online. So it's important here to keep the interest in the lesson, get the students participating as much as possible. So making really big use of the breakout rooms, using interactive material. So if you've got a worksheet that you would use in class, then what you can do is to use something like Teachermade. And what this allows you to do is to upload a PDF and create an interactive worksheet. So you put in spaces for all the answers. You can even write in the answers so it auto corrects, meaning that students are doing a very similar thing online to what they'd be doing in class. And then, of course, things like Kahoot and so on. You've got to be flexible when you're teaching online. You've got to be ready to accept a new situation. You've got to be really, what I find is you have to be even more relaxed and even more composed than you would be if you were teaching face to face, especially around the issues with technology, because people get very flustered. Oh, I can't hear you, or my microphone's not working, or my video's not working, or it's not very clear. I'm having, whatever the issues are. So you've just got to be calm, explain what to do, and help them move on. And of course, you might have issues yourself. You might have a day where the internet's a bit bad, or computer's not working, computer crashes or something like that, which has happened to me. I've been teaching and my computer's crashed. I've been in Zoom and it's just stopped working. My students can hear me, but I can see that it's not working. I just have to say something like, I'm really sorry. Zoom's crashed. I'm gonna be leaving for a few minutes while I reset it all. Just stay here, don't go anywhere. I'll be back as soon as I can. Stay composed. For yourself, in that situation, that means you've got to come out of Zoom, possibly restart your computer, go back into Zoom, get back into the classroom, and then carry on. Might take a couple of minutes, but it will take even longer if you're stressed about it. So just be flexible. Okay, we're going to move on now to talk about personal learning networks. So when you start a new job, there is a lot to learn, especially if it's a new career, not even a new job, a new career. So a really good thing to do is to find a mentor, hopefully within your school, possibly a teacher who's worked there for some time, who can help you explain the way around, even finding resources, how to complete lesson plans and other admin things that have got to be done within that organization. So that's a really useful thing, because you will need help, you will need advice. So finding that person who can offer that to you will be really helpful. Make friends with the teachers at the school as well. They will have maybe taught the students that you're going to be teaching at lower levels. They're going to have really good ideas and materials that you can use, and you'll be able to pull on their wealth of knowledge to help you through your first lessons. You might also be able to use those people, your mentor. You might be able to go in and observe them teaching. A lot of schools do things called peer observations, where teachers observe each other. So people often find that a bit less stressful than being observed by management. And it gives you a really good opportunity to pick up new tips, new skills, ways of dealing with things, new ideas of how to present information, and so on. Finding online EFL teacher groups can be a really good idea, even in social media, things like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so on. There are lots of different groups. Just do a search of them and find those different groups. So now, continuing professional development, or CPD. So the first thing to do is to find out if your school offers CPD. And really, it's worth finding this out during the interview process. So at that point where they say, have you got any questions for us? Ask about the CPD that they offer. Ideally, you want to have sessions, training sessions, where you're looking at different skills, different methodologies, and things like that, as well as observations and observation programs. So how often are you going to be observed by management? What kind of peer observations and things like that are done? Okay. Familiarise yourself with the latest teaching methodologies, and the longer you teach and the more experienced you get as a teacher, you'll find that methodologies sort of go round in a circle, and something becomes popular, then it falls out of popularity, then becomes popular again, and so on. So it's a good idea to find out, what is the latest, what are people doing now. And one way you can do this is to attend conferences, lectures, and so on. And there'll be conferences and things that go on in the country where you're working, or hope, if you're lucky, even the city or the place where you are living, there will be things for you to see. Online, there will be lots of magazines and journal articles that you can read, as well as ones that are on in print. So Google Scholar is a really good way of finding material for this. as well as, like we said before, talking to colleagues and finding where they get information from as well. There's things like the How-To series by Pearson, which is a really useful way to start. So they've got things like how to teach English, or how to teach pronunciation, how to teach vocabulary, how to teach English with technology. ELT magazines, we've got things like EFL magazine, Demand High ELT, English Language Teaching, which is a global blog, and also the British Council. So that's a really good place to go to as well to get information. Taking up a course can be a good way to continue to develop. With teaching, you should find that you are continually learning something new. And so a good way to do that is through CPD, doing courses, so that you're constantly up to date with the latest material. Whether that's through your organisation, so perhaps they will pay for you to do courses, or even like free courses that are available to you on places like Coursera or FutureLearn. And this looks really good on your CV as well, you know, when you start applying for jobs in the future, to see that you've carried on developing after your initial training and that you've tried to keep up with things, will look really good to future potential employers. Keeping up to date with technology, this can be quite tricky, but you know, the latest apps, latest resources online, so that you're always able to keep moving forward and you're using the latest things in class as well. And the last thing to mention is self-care. So we talked a lot about what you need to do to prepare for being in class in those first few lessons. And also we talked about the amount of time that it will take you to prepare those first lessons. So you're going to spend a lot of time either in the classroom or thinking about being in the classroom. But it's important as well that you still maintain that work-life balance. So making sure that you do take time to relax. You're not spending all weekend preparing lessons and looking for material. You are able to do other things. You know, if you're traveling to another country, for example, you're there for a reason. You know, you're there because you want to understand or learn about or be immersed in a new culture. So you need to give yourself time to do that. If you do find things difficult, then it's important to get professional help as soon as you can, as soon as you need it. Talk to your school, talk to your work, and they will be able to point you in the right direction. But what's important to remember, of course, is that you put in what you get out. So if you focus on professionalism and you focus on doing the best lessons that you can, and having the best material that you can, then you're going to enjoy your classes. You're doing this not only for your students, but you're doing it for yourself, because a well-prepared lesson is so much easier to teach and so much more rewarding and so much less stressful. So it's good for you as well, and you will feel really great about it, and you'll have a really fulfilling career. Teaching should be fun, and it should be enjoyable. And so what we're looking at today is how you can make it a fun and enjoyable career. So now we're over to you. Now it's our chance for our Q&A. So any questions you've got about what we've covered today? Unfortunately, I can only answer questions about today's topic. Unfortunately, we don't really have time to go into any other subjects. So if you've got other questions, as always, please do use the ticket system. But otherwise, let's see what questions you've got. So if you like to type your questions into the chat, and then I'll get through as many of them as I can in the time we've got left. So let's see what questions you've got. Okay, so Xander, I hope I pronounced that correctly. How long does a teaching session take? That really depends on where you're teaching. Okay, there are places, I think especially Japan, where sometimes lessons are only like 30 minutes or something. Typically, lessons should be 1 hour. But again, some places will talk about an academic hour, which is usually 45 minutes. You could have lessons which are longer than that. So if you're teaching like on a specialist course, for example, a summer school, you might have 3-hour lessons. So there's obviously quite a lot of preparation that goes in there. You might teach a business class, which could be 2 hours, or an adult class, which is 2 hours. So it really depends. The lessons themselves can be very different lengths. So thank you for that question. I hope that was helpful. Let's have a look. Right, Judy. So some places you can go for professional development. So I talked about the Pearson series of books, the how-to series. So there's things like how to teach English or how to teach pronunciation and so on. So there's a whole series, How To by Pearson. Then places to go on the internet where you can find resources and articles and so on. You've got the EFL magazine, Demand High ELT, English Language Teaching Global Blog, and the British Council. Okay. You've got some other magazines at ET Professional. TEFL is a good place to go to. TEFL. Okay. Modern English Teacher and EFL magazine again. Okay. Let's have a look. What are the questions? Okay, that's an interesting question. So, what kind of course do I need to be able to teach English, not only as a foreign language, but also as a first language? Because some international schools teach English literature as well. That's a really good question there. Now, that will really depend on the school and also your qualifications. International schools quite often want you to have a PGCE. In the UK, to be able to teach in a state school, so teaching English as a first language, you'd have to have a PGCE, so that's a teaching qualification that you go to university for. So quite often international schools need that. The best things I would suggest, because international schools are usually independent, would be to talk to the individual school and see what qualifications they are looking for themselves. Okay. So thank you for that question. Okay, here's an interesting question. So I mentioned Google Scholar. And that's something you've never heard of. Okay, so if you go into just do a Google search of Let me think of something. Right, you do a Google search of the silent approach EFL. Okay, you'll come up with lots of different things, YouTube videos, possibly Wikipedia links, and so on. We all know that Wikipedia isn't always the greatest thing. However, if you go to Google and in the Google search you type Scholar, the first thing that will come up is Google Scholar. And what that does, so it brings up a new search engine, okay, and you type in your search there. So you type the silent approach EFL, you do that again. And what it does is it only brings up like journal articles, published articles, books, academic material for the subject, rather than all the other things that would, newspaper articles and things that would come up in the normal search. So it's more focused on academic study in Google Scholar rather than everything. And there will be a lot of things that come up in Google Scholar that wouldn't come up in Google because it's focused on those academic articles and journals and so on. Okay, so I hope that helped you. Thank you for that question. Okay, so we've got a question here from Yulia. What should a new teacher focus on? Oh, this is a great question, Yulia. Well, really, you need to focus on a little bit of everything. Okay, there is no point in having the most prepared lesson plan if when you go into class you are a nervous wreck. Okay, and on the flip side, there's no point in striding into class full of confidence and no idea what you're going to do next. Okay, so you really need to have a little bit of all of those things that we've talked about and build up on them. Okay, so you're going to see yourself where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. So then you start to focus on your own strengths and your own weaknesses. Okay, so thank you for that. That's a really good question. Thank you, Yulia. Okay, we've got another question here from Alexandra. So, is Zoom the best platform to teach online? Well, all through COVID, before COVID, nobody had heard of Zoom. And then as soon as COVID hit, everyone was on Zoom. And Zoom has, obviously, they want you to pay, but they have a free package as well. The free package only allowed meetings of 40 minutes when there were more than 2 people. So if you're teaching one-to-one, then Zoom is absolutely fine because you could have your hour-long session and that's not a problem. However, Zoom now, they're trying to rake in more money and perhaps demand has gone down a little bit. And so now they're charging a flat rate. So it's only free for the first 40 minutes, regardless of how many you've got, which is quite frustrating when you've got an hour lesson. So actually my online lessons, I'm now moving over to Google Meet, which is free to use. It does everything that Zoom does. It's perhaps not quite as user-friendly as Zoom, but actually it's not bad and it really is getting there. So if your lessons are only 40 minutes, Zoom is absolutely fine. If you're like me and your lessons are an hour long, Zoom actually becomes really frustrating. All you have to do, so if your lesson is an hour long, all you've got to do is to remember before the 40 minutes is up to log out, for your student to log out as well, and then log directly back in with the same link. So it's not the biggest hardship, it's just a bit frustrating. And it doesn't need to be. So yes, either try Zoom, try Google Meet. Skype has kind of fallen by the wayside because Microsoft are promoting Teams instead. And some people use Teams and they rely on Teams and they get on really well. And other people don't. I don't really use Teams, so I can't really say if it's good or bad. So Zoom or Google Meet. Okay. What short course training do you recommend one takes in addition to teaching EFL? Okay, so this is a really good question, Shelton. And it really depends on what you want to do. So you've probably seen with the TEFL Academy that we offer some short courses. So we have short courses teaching online, teaching teaching online, so teaching one-to-one, teaching young learners, and teaching business. Sorry, so I'll go through that again. So we've got teaching online, teaching young learners, and teaching business. So we offer those short courses. It really depends what you want to focus on in your teaching career. So I see that somebody a bit further down, one of the questions that they're asking is about teaching IELTS and recommending a course to teach IELTS. Okay. So if you know what you want to teach, then you can, it's quite easy through the TEFL Academy, do one of our short courses, have a look at those. And then once you're in a school, ask the school about any other courses, because there might be ones locally. And that actually helps to answer the question about the IELTS as well, and doing IELTS training. So the best way to do IELTS training is locally. So either within the school where you're teaching, or the British Council or whoever runs IELTS locally to you. Okay, so find out who does that and they will do training. So two good questions there. Thank you very much. And that's it. We are out of time. Thank you very much for your participation this afternoon. As always, at the end of our seminars, we would like you please to complete the short survey, which I've posted in the chat as well. So please do take, it's just literally a couple of minutes to fill in that survey so that we can get some feedback on the webinars that we're producing for you. So thank you very much for attending this afternoon. Thank you for all your really helpful questions. Some really great questions there, so thank you very much. And I hope to see you all again very soon. So thank you very much. Have a good afternoon and goodbye, everyone.